The moment she laughed, loud and careless, something inside him quietly broke. It wasn't just the sound, it was the way people turned, the way the candle between them flickered as if embarrassed on his behalf, the way his hands instinctively tightened around the stem of a half-empty glass just to keep from shaking. Across the table sat a stranger who was supposed to be a chance at something new, something hopeful. Instead, she was already checking her phone, already bored, already done. And for the first time in a long time, he regretted trying at all. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that change lives, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like this remind us that sometimes, the worst nights lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Ethan had not wanted to be there. He had almost cancelled 3 times that afternoon, staring at his phone while his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, colored quietly on the living room floor. The babysitter was already arranged, the shirt already ironed, but his heart felt heavy in a way he couldn't explain. It had been 3 years since his wife passed, 3 long years of learning how to braid hair, how to pack school lunches, how to smile through the ache that never quite left. Dating felt like betrayal at first, then like a chore, and now it just felt exhausting. But people insisted. His sister, his co-workers, even Lily in her innocent way had once said he should find someone who makes you laugh again. So he tried. Again. And now here he was, sitting across from a woman who clearly thought she had made a mistake. She had arrived late, barely apologized, and spent most of the evening talking about herself, her travels, her job, her expectations. Somewhere between her second complaint about the restaurant and her third glance at her phone, Ethan realized she hadn't asked him a single meaningful question. Not about his life. Not about Lily. Not about anything that mattered. When he finally mentioned his daughter, her expression shifted, just slightly, but enough. A polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. A pause that felt longer than it should have been. And then, the subtle but unmistakable withdrawal. It wasn't the first time he had seen that reaction. Single dad. To some, it meant baggage. To others, it meant complications. To him, it meant everything. By the time the check arrived, she was already mentally gone. She insisted on splitting the bill, a gesture that felt less like independence and more like distance. When she stood to leave, she offered a quick, rehearsed smile and said something vague about being busy in the coming weeks. Ethan nodded, forcing a smile in return, though his chest felt hollow. The date had lasted less than an hour, but it had drained something deeper than time. He sat there for a moment after she left, staring at the empty chair, wondering why he kept putting himself through this. Maybe he wasn't meant for this anymore. Maybe his life was meant to stay small, centered around Lily, safe but lonely. The restaurant buzzed softly around him, clinking glasses, quiet laughter, the hum of conversations that didn't include him. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead, trying to shake off the weight of the evening. That's when she spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just softly enough to reach him. She asked if he wanted another glass of water. Ethan looked up, startled, as if waking from a fog. The waitress stood beside the table, her expression calm, her eyes kind in a way that felt genuine. Not forced. Not polite for the sake of tips. Just quietly observant. He hadn't even noticed her before. He nodded, more out of reflex than intention, and watched as she refilled his glass with careful hands. There was something steady about her presence, something grounding. She didn't rush away immediately like the others might have. Instead, she lingered just a second longer than necessary. Then she said something unexpected. She told him that not all nights were meant to go well. Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. It wasn't intrusive, and yet it felt like she had seen straight through the evening without being part of it. He gave a small, tired smile, the kind that carried more resignation than humor. She didn't pity him. That was the difference. Her voice held no trace of sympathy that made him feel small. Instead, it held understanding, as if she recognized the kind of disappointment that came from trying when it would have been easier not to. She told him, gently, that sometimes the wrong people show up just to remind us what the right ones won't feel like. And for some reason, that stayed with him. Ethan left the restaurant that night still feeling the sting of rejection, but something about her words softened the edges of it. It didn't erase the loneliness, but it made it feel less final. The next morning, life resumed as it always did. Lily woke him up early, climbing into his bed with messy hair and sleepy eyes, asking for pancakes. He made them, slightly burned as usual, and she ate them anyway, smiling as if they were perfect. They walked to school together, her small hand wrapped around his, her voice filling the silence with stories about classmates and imaginary worlds. And yet, throughout the day, his mind drifted back to the restaurant. Not to the date. To her. To the waitress who had seen him when no one else had. Days passed, then a week. Ethan told himself it didn't matter. It was just a moment, just a passing interaction. But something pulled at him, something quiet but persistent. Until one evening, without overthinking it, he found himself standing outside the same restaurant again. He almost turned back. But then he thought of Lily, of the way she believed in small chances, in trying again. So he stepped inside. The place looked the same, warm lights, soft conversations, familiar smells. But this time, he wasn't there to impress anyone. He wasn't there to prove anything. He just wanted clarity. It didn't take long to see her. She moved between tables with the same quiet confidence, the same calm presence. When she noticed him, there was a brief flicker of recognition, followed by a soft smile that felt surprisingly real. He sat down, unsure of what he was doing, unsure of what he would even say. But when she approached his table, everything felt easier. There was no pressure, no expectations, no performance. Just two people, sharing a moment without pretense. She remembered him. Not just as a customer, but as someone who had looked like he needed a little kindness. And this time, when she spoke, the conversation didn't feel one-sided. It didn't feel forced. It unfolded naturally, like something that had been waiting for the right moment to begin. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he hadn't planned to. About Lily. About the years he had spent learning how to be both parents. About the fear that maybe he wasn't enough, that maybe his life was too complicated for anyone else to step into. She listened. Truly listened. And when she spoke, she didn't offer empty reassurance. She offered honesty, warmth, and something deeper, a quiet belief that maybe his story wasn't something to be worked around, but something to be valued. Her name was Sarah. And she didn't see him as a burden. She saw him as someone who had kept going when it would have been easier to stop. Weeks turned into months. What started as brief conversations at a restaurant slowly grew into something more. Coffee after her shifts. Walks in the park. Moments that felt simple, but meaningful. And eventually, Lily met her. Ethan had been nervous, more nervous than he had been on any date. But Lily, with her open heart and fearless honesty, took to Sarah in a way that felt almost natural. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Just a quiet acceptance that made Ethan realize how much he had underestimated the possibility of this. It wasn't perfect. There were fears, doubts, moments of uncertainty. But there was also patience, understanding, and a kind of kindness that didn't demand anything in return. The kind that stays. And one evening, sitting at the same restaurant where everything had begun, Ethan realized something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Stories like this remind us that even in our lowest moments, something beautiful might be quietly waiting just around the corner. Before we end, tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced a moment where kindness changed everything? Because sometimes, the worst nights don't end in heartbreak. Sometimes, they lead you exactly where you were meant to be.